My name is Carol, and I'm 62 years old. 3 years ago, I lost my husband to cancer, and since then, I've been trying my best to be both mother and father to my two grown children. I've always believed that love means giving everything you have to your family. Over the years, I've helped Amanda and Brandon through countless financial struggles, thinking I was being a good mother. But sometimes, love gets taken advantage of in the most painful ways, and sometimes it takes a slap across the face to wake you up to the truth about the people you've sacrificed everything for. Before we dive into what happened that day at the restaurant, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button if you've ever felt unappreciated by family, and don't forget to subscribe because I have a feeling you'll want to hear how this story ends. Have you ever felt like your children only see you as an ATM machine? When my husband Robert passed away from lung cancer 3 years ago, he left me with more than just memories. He left me $8 million, a successful real estate company, and two children who I thought would need me more than ever. Robert had built our wealth from nothing, starting with a small construction business that grew into one of the most respected real estate development companies in our city. He was a careful man, methodical, and he'd often warned me about being too generous with money. I remember him saying once while he was still fighting the cancer, "Carol, honey, sometimes the greatest disservice you can do to someone is to make their life too easy." At the time, I thought he was just being his usual cautious self. I wish I had listened more carefully. Amanda, my 35-year-old daughter, had gone through a messy divorce 2 years before her father died. She moved back to town with her two young children, claiming she needed a fresh start. I was thrilled to have her close by again, and when she mentioned struggling to find affordable housing, I didn't hesitate to help. What started as a temporary loan of $15,000 for a security deposit quickly became a monthly allowance. "Mom, the kids need new school clothes," she'd call and say. Or, "Mom, my car broke down and I can't get to work without it." Each request seemed reasonable, each crisis seemed genuine. Over 2 years, I'd given her nearly $500,000 in what she called temporary loans. Not once had she paid back a single dollar. My son Brandon, 32, had married Jessica 2 years ago in what I thought was a beautiful ceremony. Jessica seemed sweet at first, always complimenting my cooking and asking about my day. Brandon had started what he called an investment consulting business right after the wedding. Every few months, he'd come to me with an opportunity that required capital. "Mom, this client needs a bridge loan and I can make 20% profit in 60 days, he'd explain with such confidence. "I just need to borrow $300,000 to make it happen." The business ventures never seemed to materialize into actual profits, but there was always another opportunity, another client, another sure thing just around the corner. Jessica would sit beside him during these conversations, nodding supportively and occasionally adding comments like, "Brandon is so smart with investments, Mrs. Peterson. You're lucky to have such a brilliant son." I found myself writing check after check, believing I was helping my son build his future. But lately, I'd begun to notice patterns that made me uncomfortable. The phone calls always seemed to come when they needed something. The visits always included a request for money. When I suggested family dinners or movie nights, there was always an excuse. Amanda was too busy with the kids. Brandon and Jessica had work events. Yet when I mentioned needing help with yard work or doctor's appointments, suddenly everyone had time if there was payment involved. I started keeping track of our conversations, and I realized that in the past 6 months, neither of my children had called just to check on me. Every single interaction involved a financial request. The realization sat heavy in my chest like a cold stone. The first real red flag came on a Tuesday night at 11:30. I was already in bed reading a mystery novel when my phone rang with that urgent tone that always makes a mother's heart skip. It was Amanda, and she was crying. "Mom, I need your help. I've been evicted. The landlord changed the locks today while I was at work. The kids and I are sitting in my car right now with nowhere to go." My heart broke hearing her sob. "Oh, honey, what happened? I thought your rent was current." "I've been behind for 3 months. I didn't want to worry you, but now they've thrown us out completely. I need $30,000 tonight to get into a new place. There's an apartment available, but they want first month, last month, and a huge security deposit because of my credit." I didn't hesitate. "Text me the address where you are. I'm coming to get you and the kids right now." "No, Mom, we're staying with a friend tonight. But I need the money transfer first thing in the morning or we'll lose this apartment opportunity." Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I promised to handle the transfer first thing the next morning and spent the night worrying about my daughter and grandchildren sleeping in someone else's home. The next morning, I went to the bank early and wired the money, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to drive by the address Amanda had given me as her old apartment. When I arrived, I was confused. There were no eviction notices on the door. The apartment looked lived in with children's bikes on the small porch and lights on inside. I sat in my car across the street, wondering if I'd written down the wrong address. That's when I saw a woman I recognized as Amanda's neighbor from when I'd helped her move in. I approached her as she was getting her mail. "Excuse me, I'm Amanda's mother. I was wondering if you knew what happened with her eviction yesterday." The woman looked confused. "Eviction? Amanda hasn't been evicted. She's right there in her apartment. In fact, I saw her washing a brand new Honda Civic yesterday. Beautiful car. She mentioned she paid cash for it." My stomach dropped. I thanked the woman and returned to my car, sitting there for 20 minutes trying to make sense of what I'd just learned. A new car paid in cash the same day she'd claimed to be homeless. I decided to test what I'd discovered. I called Amanda. "How are you settling into the new place, sweetheart?" "Oh, it's great, Mom. The kids love their new rooms. I can't thank you enough for helping us out of that terrible situation." She was lying effortlessly and convincingly. I felt like I was going to be sick. That evening, I decided to drive by Brandon and Jessica's house. He'd called me just last week saying business was slow and they might lose their house if he couldn't make the mortgage payment. I'd sent $15,000. Their house was ablaze with lights and there were several cars in the driveway. Through the large front windows, I could see people holding wine glasses, laughing and enjoying what looked like a dinner party. I recognized the cars as belonging to Jessica's friends from her social media posts. As I sat there watching, I saw Jessica step onto the front porch to take a phone call. I rolled down my window and could hear her clearly. "Girl, this house is amazing. And the best part is, we don't even have to pay for it. Brandon's mom basically pays our mortgage. She's so gullible, it's almost too easy. We just tell her the business is struggling and she hands over whatever we need." I heard her laugh, a sound that would haunt me for days. I know, right? The woman literally has millions, and she acts like giving us a few thousand here and there is some huge sacrifice. Brandon says when she dies, we'll inherit everything anyway, so why not get it now while we can enjoy it? I drove home that night with tears streaming down my face, trying to convince myself that I'd misheard or misunderstood. But deep down, I knew exactly what I'd heard. I needed to know for certain where I stood with my children, so I decided to test their love with a lie of my own. If money was truly all they cared about, their reactions would tell me everything I needed to know. The next morning, I called Amanda first. "Honey, I need to tell you something important. I made a terrible mistake with my investments. I put nearly $1 million into what I thought was a safe pharmaceutical stock, but the company just declared bankruptcy. I've lost almost everything." There was a pause, and then Amanda's voice became noticeably cooler. "What do you mean you lost everything? How could you be so careless with money?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this affects the family and I feel terrible about it." "Mom, I don't have time for this right now. I have my own problems to deal with. You need to figure this out yourself. I'm hanging up." The line went dead. No, "Are you okay?" No, "How can I help?" No concern for my emotional state. Just anger that the money train might be ending. An hour later, I called Brandon with the same story. "You've got to be kidding me," was his first response. "Mom, how could you be so stupid? Don't you realize that affects our inheritance? You should have consulted with me before making any major financial decisions." In the background, I could hear Jessica's voice clearly. "Wait, so there's no money left? What are we supposed to live on now?" Brandon didn't even try to lower his voice when he responded to her. "I don't know. We'll have to figure something else out." Then he returned to our conversation. "Mom, you better hope you can recover some of that money because we've been counting on your support." "Brandon, I'm scared and I need my family right now." "Well, you should have thought about that before you gambled away our future." He hung up without another word. I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, feeling more alone than I had since Robert died. My children, the people I loved most in the world, had just shown me that their love was entirely conditional on my bank account. To test this further, I decided to see what would happen if I really needed them. I called Amanda 2 days later and told her I wasn't feeling well and could use some company. Mom, I'm really busy today. Maybe this weekend if I have time. But then I called her 3 hours later and mentioned that I needed someone to drive me to the bank to sign some papers for my investment recovery. I'll be right there, Mom. Don't sign anything until I get there. She arrived within 30 minutes, the fastest she'd ever responded to any request. The difference in her urgency was obvious and heartbreaking. Over the following weeks, I began paying attention to every interaction I had with my children. The pattern was undeniable. If money was involved, they were available, attentive, and loving. If I simply wanted their company or emotional support, they were always too busy, too tired, or too stressed with their own lives. The final confirmation came when I discovered that Amanda had lied about her divorce entirely. I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do to my own child. The report showed that Amanda had never actually divorced her husband. They were still legally married and living together. The child support struggles and single mother hardships were complete fabrications designed to manipulate my sympathy and my wallet. Brandon's investment company didn't exist. He had no business license, no clients, and no office. The $300,000 I'd given him for business opportunities had been spent on luxury vacations, designer clothes, and his wife's shopping habits. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. I decided to invite my children to lunch for Amanda's 35th birthday. I chose Bella Corte, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown where Robert and I used to celebrate special occasions. I thought maybe in a beautiful setting we could reconnect as a family. I was still holding on to hope that their behavior toward me was just a phase, that underneath their financial focus, they still loved me for who I was. I arrived early and chose a quiet table by the window. I'd brought a birthday gift for Amanda, a check for $50,000 that I planned to present during lunch. Despite everything I'd discovered, I still wanted to believe that generosity might rekindle genuine affection. When Amanda, Brandon, and Jessica arrived, I was struck by how little enthusiasm they showed for seeing me. Amanda barely hugged me before sitting down and immediately starting to scroll through her phone. Brandon gave me a quick kiss on the cheek but seemed distracted. Jessica smiled, but it was the same plastic smile I'd seen her use with people she didn't particularly like. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said to Amanda, trying to inject warmth into the conversation. "Thanks," she replied without looking up from her phone. I tried to engage them in conversation about their lives, their plans, their dreams. I asked Amanda about the kids' school year and whether she was dating anyone. I asked Brandon about his goals for the future and whether he and Jessica were thinking about having children. Their responses were monosyllabic and distracted. It became clear that they were physically present but emotionally absent. They were going through the motions of a family lunch, but their hearts weren't in it. Feeling desperate to connect, I decided to share something personal. "I've been feeling quite lonely lately," I admitted. "Since your father died, the house feels so empty. I've been thinking about maybe selling it and moving to a smaller place, maybe a condo where there are other people around." Amanda murmured, still looking at her phone. "That sounds nice, Mom," Brandon said in a tone that suggested he wasn't really listening. Jessica didn't even acknowledge that I'd spoken. I felt invisible sitting at that table with my own children. But then I decided to test something. I changed the subject completely. "I've also been thinking about my will lately. I'm considering making some changes to how I distribute the estate. I'm thinking about leaving a significant portion to charity, maybe the children's hospital where your father received such good care." The effect was immediate and dramatic. 3 phones disappeared instantly. 3 pairs of eyes locked onto me with laser focus. "What do you mean, charity?" Amanda asked, her voice sharp with alarm. "Well, I've been thinking about legacy and what really matters. There are so many children who need help, and I have more money than I could ever spend." Brandon leaned forward aggressively. "Mom, you can't be serious. That money belongs to the family. Dad worked his whole life to build that wealth for us, for his children. Actually, your father never specified that the money had to go to you two. He left it to me to decide how to distribute it." Jessica jumped into the conversation for the first time all afternoon. "Mrs. Peterson, that's incredibly selfish of you. Brandon and I have been planning our future based on that inheritance. You can't just take that away from us." "I'm not taking anything away. The money is mine to distribute as I see fit." Amanda's face was turning red with anger. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're being completely irrational. What has some charity ever done for you? We're your children. We're your blood. We deserve that money. Deserve it based on what? I asked quietly. Based on the fact that we're your family, Brandon shouted, drawing stares from other diners. When was the last time either of you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you visited without asking for money? When was the last time you showed any interest in my life beyond what I could give you? The table fell silent for a moment. Then Amanda stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. How dare you question our love for you? We've always been good children. Just because we don't call every single day doesn't mean we don't love you. You don't call any day unless you need something. That's not true. When did you last call me, Amanda? She paused, clearly trying to remember. I call you all the time. You called me 4 days ago to ask for money for your car repair. Before that, you called 2 weeks ago to ask for money for the kids' school supplies. Before that, you called 3 weeks ago to ask for money for your rent. I'm still waiting for the call where you just wanted to talk to your mother. Brandon slammed his hand on the table. And this is insane. You're being completely unfair. You're our mother. You're supposed to take care of us. I've been taking care of you. For 3 years, I've given you everything you've asked for. I've handed you nearly $1 million between the two of you. And you should... Amanda's voice was getting louder and more shrill. That's what mothers do. You don't get to hold that over our heads and then threaten to give our inheritance to strangers. Those strangers might actually appreciate it. That's when it happened. Amanda's hand flew across the table and struck my face with a sharp slap that echoed through the restaurant. The entire dining room fell silent. You selfish, ungrateful woman, she screamed. All you are to us is a bank account. Don't try to pretend you're anything more than that. Brandon began clapping slowly, sarcastically. Finally, someone said what needed to be said. Jessica was smirking, clearly enjoying the spectacle. I sat there, my cheek burning, my heart shattered, surrounded by the shocked stares of strangers while my own children celebrated my humiliation. The woman at the next table reached over and gently touched my shoulder, but I could barely register her kindness through my devastation. I stood up, slowly placed the birthday check on the table, and looked at my children one last time. Thank you, I said quietly, for finally showing me who you really are. I walked out of that restaurant knowing that my life would never be the same again. I drove home in a state of emotional numbness that felt like a protective shell around my shattered heart. My face still stung from Amanda's slap, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the devastation I felt inside. I sat in my driveway for nearly an hour, staring at the house Robert and I had built together, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. When I finally went inside, the silence was deafening. I wandered from room to room, looking at family photos that now seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. There was Amanda's high school graduation, where she'd hugged me tight and thanked me for always believing in her. There was Brandon's wedding day, where he told me I was the best mother in the world. Had those moments been real, or had I been deluding myself even then? I found myself standing in Robert's old office, looking at the portrait of our family that hung behind his desk. We looked so happy, so complete. Robert's arm was around my shoulders, and both children were smiling genuinely. I wondered what he would think if he could see us now. That's when I remembered his words about making life too easy for people. I remembered other conversations we'd had about spoiling the children, about teaching them the value of money and hard work. Robert had always been more cautious about giving handouts even to our own kids. He'd wanted them to earn their own way, to build their own character through struggle and achievement. You can't buy love, Carol, he'd said once after I'd given Amanda money for her first apartment. And you shouldn't try. I'd dismissed his concerns at the time, thinking he was being too harsh. Now I understood that he'd been trying to protect all of us from exactly this situation. I made my way down to the basement, to the room where Robert had installed his safe during the early years of the business. It was a massive fireproof unit that held all our most important documents. I'd only opened it a few times since his death, and never for anything significant. The combination was our wedding anniversary. As the heavy door swung open, I saw stacks of documents neatly organized in folders, several jewelry boxes containing pieces I rarely wore, and something I'd almost forgotten about: $8 million in cash. Robert had always kept emergency money on hand, partly from his Depression-era upbringing and partly from his business experience. He'd seen too many companies fail because they couldn't access their assets quickly when crisis hit. The money was in hundreds and fifties vacuum sealed and stored in climate-controlled containers. I pulled out the folder containing my will, a document I'd signed 2 years ago during a time when I was certain my children loved me unconditionally. Reading through it now felt surreal. Everything was to be divided equally between Amanda and Brandon with small bequests to charity. I'd been so confident that they would use their inheritance wisely, that they would honor their father's memory and continue his legacy of hard work and generosity. How wrong I'd been. I spent the next 3 hours going through every financial record from the past 3 years. I documented every loan I'd made to my children, every emergency I'd helped them through, every investment opportunity I'd funded. The total was staggering, nearly $800,000 to two people who had just made it clear that they saw me as nothing more than an ATM. I called my attorney, Margaret Chen, and left a message asking for an emergency appointment the next morning. Then I called Robert's old accountant and asked him to prepare a complete financial statement of all my assets. But most importantly, I sat down at Robert's old desk and began writing. I wrote a new will leaving my entire estate to 3 charities: the Children's Hospital, where Robert had been treated, a local organization that helped single mothers genuinely in need, and a scholarship fund for students from low-income families who wanted to study business. As I wrote, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. For the first time since Robert's death, I was making a decision based on my own values rather than trying to buy love and approval from people who were incapable of giving either. I also wrote letters to Amanda and Brandon explaining my decision and expressing my hope that someday they might understand. I wasn't writing out of anger or revenge. I was writing from a place of clarity about what kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind. By the time I finished, it was nearly 3 in the morning. I sealed everything in envelopes and placed them back in the safe along with the cash and jewelry. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming my life and my dignity. For the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep feeling like I was finally honoring Robert's memory and my own self-worth. The next 3 days were the most liberating and terrifying of my life since Robert's death. I woke up that Thursday morning with a clarity of purpose that surprised me. I knew exactly what needed to be done, and I was going to do it methodically and completely. My first stop was Margaret Chen's law office. Margaret had been Robert's attorney for 15 years and had become a trusted family friend. When I walked into her office and she saw my face, her expression immediately filled with concern. "Carol, what happened to you? Is that a bruise on your cheek?" I told her everything. I told her about the years of financial manipulation, about the lies I'd discovered, and about what had happened at the restaurant the day before. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "I want to change my will completely," I said when I finished my story. "I don't want to leave a single dollar to either of my children." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Carol, I understand you're hurt and angry, and you have every right to be. But this is a major decision. Are you sure you want to make it so quickly after such a traumatic experience?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Margaret, they told me to my face that I'm nothing but a bank account to them. Amanda actually said those exact words. I'm not making this decision in anger. I'm making it in self-respect." We spent 2 hours drafting a new will. I left everything to charities with specific instructions that my children were to be informed of this decision immediately after my death. I also included a clause explaining that this decision was made with full mental capacity and was not subject to challenge. After leaving Margaret's office, I went to the bank. I closed all joint accounts that I'd opened to help my children, removing their access to my money immediately. I moved the $8 million from the safe into a trust account that would transfer to the charities upon my death. That afternoon, Amanda called. "Mom, I've been thinking about yesterday, and I think we all need to sit down and talk like adults. I may have overreacted a little bit." A little bit? She'd assaulted me in a public restaurant, and she thought she'd overreacted a little bit. "I don't think there's anything to discuss, Amanda." "Come on, Mom. You know I didn't mean what I said. I was just upset because the thought of you giving away Dad's hard work to strangers hurt my feelings. Family should come first." "You're right," I said. "Family should come first. That's exactly why I'm making the decisions I'm making." "What do you mean?" "You'll understand soon enough." I hung up and turned off my phone. Friday morning brought a visit from Brandon and Jessica. They knocked on my door at 8 a.m., clearly having coordinated their approach with Amanda. Mom, we need to talk, Brandon said as soon as I opened the door. Jessica and I feel terrible about how things went on Wednesday. Jessica stepped forward with tears in her eyes that looked remarkably convincing. Mrs. Peterson, I'm so sorry. I spoke completely out of turn. You have every right to do whatever you want with your money, and I had no business giving you my opinion. We've all been under a lot of stress, Brandon added. But we're family, and family works through their problems together. I let them into the living room and listened to 20 minutes of carefully crafted apologies and promises to do better. They talked about wanting to spend more time together, about how much they loved me, about how grateful they were for everything I'd done for them. It was a masterful performance, and it might have worked if I hadn't already heard Jessica calling me gullible on the phone, and Brandon discussing their inheritance as if it were already theirs. I appreciate you both coming, I said when they finished. I really do, and I want you to know that I forgive you for Wednesday. They both visibly relaxed. However, I continued, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean returning to the way things were. What do you mean? Brandon asked, his smile faltering slightly. I mean that I've made some changes to my financial arrangements that you'll need to know about. What kind of changes? Jessica's voice had an edge of panic. You'll find out soon enough. I'm having a small gathering here on Sunday afternoon. I'd like you both to come, and please ask Amanda to join us. I have some things to share with the family. They left that day confused and concerned, but I could tell they thought they'd managed to smooth things over. They had no idea what was coming. Saturday, I spent the entire day doing something I hadn't done in months. I did things that made me happy. I went to my favorite garden center and bought flowers for the front yard. I called my sister in Phoenix, whom I'd neglected while dealing with my children's constant crises. I made my grandmother's recipe for chocolate cake, something I hadn't baked since Robert died. I also went to the bank one more time and withdrew $50,000 in cash. I had plans for that money that would make the next day very interesting. Sunday morning, I prepared a simple lunch sandwiches, salad, and the chocolate cake. I set the dining room table with Robert's good china and put fresh flowers in the center. If this was going to be my last family meal, I wanted it to be beautiful. Amanda, Brandon, and Jessica arrived at 1 p.m., all of them dressed nicely and wearing what I now recognized as their performance faces. They complimented the flowers, praised the food, and made small talk about the weather and neighborhood news. It was like having lunch with three very talented actors who were playing the roles of loving family members. After we finished eating, I asked them to stay seated. I wanted you all to be here together because I have some important news to share. They exchanged glances, clearly expecting me to announce that I'd changed my mind about the charity donations. Over the past few months, I've done a lot of thinking about my life, my values, and my legacy. I've also done a lot of investigating into how the money I've given you has been used. I saw Amanda's face pale slightly. I know about the lies about your divorce, Amanda. I know about your fake business, Brandon. I know about the conversations you've had about me behind my back, Jessica. The room fell completely silent. I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I'm actually grateful. You've shown me who you really are, and that's allowed me to make decisions that align with my values. I pulled out 3 envelopes and placed them on the table. These are copies of my new will, which was filed with my attorney on Thursday. You'll each receive the original copies after I die, but I wanted you to see them now so there wouldn't be any surprises. Brandon grabbed his envelope first and tore it open. As he read, his face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, rage. This says you're leaving everything to charity. Everything. That's correct. Amanda snatched her copy and read quickly. Mom, this is insane. You can't do this to us. Actually, I can. And I have. Jessica was reading over Brandon's shoulder, her mouth hanging open. $8 million. You're giving $8 million to strangers. I'm giving it to people who will use it to help others, rather than people who see me as nothing more than a source of income. Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward. You can't do this. We'll contest it. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. Good luck with that. I've had two psychiatric evaluations in the past week, both confirming my complete mental competence. I've also documented every lie you've told me, every dollar you've taken under false pretenses, and every conversation that's proven your true motivations. I pulled out the $50,000 in cash and placed it on the table. However, I'm not completely heartless. This is $50,000 in cash. It's yours to split however you choose. Consider it a final gift from someone who used to believe that you loved her. Amanda started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and desperation. Mom, please, we can change. We can be better. Please don't do this to us. You had 3 years to be better. You chose a different path. You're destroying our family, Brandon shouted. Our family was destroyed the day you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. Jessica tried one last manipulation. Mrs. Peterson, think about your grandchildren. Don't you want to leave something for them? I am thinking about them. I'm teaching them that actions have consequences and that people's worth isn't measured by their bank accounts. The three of them left my house that day with $50,000 and the knowledge that they had gambled away $8 million because they couldn't show basic human decency to the woman who had given them everything. The months that followed were both the loneliest and the most fulfilling of my life since Robert's death. The first few weeks were difficult. Amanda, Brandon, and Jessica made several attempts to reconcile, but their efforts were transparently motivated by money rather than genuine remorse. When they realized that I was serious about my decision, the attempts stopped entirely. I won't lie and say that didn't hurt. Despite everything, they were still my children, and I grieved for the relationship I'd thought we had. But I also discovered something wonderful. When you stop trying to buy love, you find out who really cares about you. My sister flew in from Phoenix and stayed with me for 2 weeks. We talked for hours about our childhood, our parents, our dreams. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced with my children wasn't normal family dynamics, but a form of emotional abuse that I'd been enabling. I started volunteering at the Children's Hospital, reading to young patients who were fighting battles much harder than any financial problem my grown children had ever faced. These children taught me about genuine gratitude, real courage, and what it means to find joy even in difficult circumstances. I joined a grief support group for widows and discovered that many women my age had similar stories about adult children who seemed more interested in inheritance than in relationship. It was both comforting and heartbreaking to learn that I wasn't alone in this experience. I also began traveling, something Robert and I had always planned to do more of. I visited Ireland, took a cooking class in Tuscany, and spent a month in New Zealand hiking and rediscovering my sense of adventure. For the first time in years, I was living for myself rather than existing to serve the financial needs of others. The charity work became the center of my new life. I didn't just write checks. I became actively involved in the organizations I'd chosen to benefit from my estate. I helped serve meals at the shelter for single mothers, I mentored business students through the scholarship program, and I spent every Tuesday morning in the children's cancer ward. Through this work, I met people who appreciated kindness for its own sake, who valued time and attention over money, who understood that the greatest gifts aren't material. I found myself surrounded by genuine relationships for the first time in years. 6 months after that day at the restaurant, I received a letter from Amanda. She was pregnant with her third child and wanted to let me know. The letter was carefully worded to avoid any direct requests for money, but the implication was clear. She hoped that the prospect of another grandchild might change my mind about my will. I wrote back, congratulating her and expressing my hope that she would find real happiness. I didn't mention money or my will. I also didn't change my decision. A year later, Brandon called to tell me that he and Jessica were getting divorced. He seemed to expect sympathy and perhaps financial support during this difficult time. I listened politely and wished him well, but I offered neither money nor emotional rescue. The truth is, I sleep better now than I have since Robert died. I wake up each morning knowing that my day will be spent on activities that bring meaning to my life and help to others. I'm not walking on eggshells wondering when the next financial crisis will arise, or how much it will cost me to maintain relationships with people who don't actually care about my well-being. I've learned that love isn't about what you can give someone else. It's about mutual respect, genuine care, and shared joy in each other's company. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by behavior. And I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their worst impulses. Would I have preferred for this story to have a different ending? Of course, I would have loved for my children to show me that their love was real, that they valued me as a person rather than as a resource. But I can't control their choices. I can only control my own. I chose self respect. I chose to honor Robert's memory by living according to our shared values rather than by trying to buy affection from people who had already shown me their true priorities. I chose to use our wealth in ways that would make a positive difference in the world rather than enabling entitled behavior from adults who needed to learn how to stand on their own feet. Some people might say I was too harsh, that I should have given them another chance, but they had 3 years and nearly $1 million worth of chances. At some point, you have to stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Today, I'm 75 years old, healthy, financially secure, and surrounded by people who care about me for who I am rather than what I have. I volunteer at the hospital 3 days a week. I travel when I want to, and I sleep peacefully, knowing that when my time comes, my legacy will be helping others rather than enabling selfishness. I never regretted the decision I made that night when I opened the safe. Sometimes love means saying no, sometimes it means setting boundaries, and sometimes it means accepting that the people you've loved most in the world are incapable of loving you back in any meaningful way. The greatest gift I gave my children wasn't the money I spent on them over the years. It was the final lesson that actions have consequences and that love cannot be taken for granted. Whether they ever learn from that lesson is up to them. As for me, I finally learned to love myself enough to demand the respect I deserve. And that, I think, is the most important lesson of all. If you've ever felt unappreciated by people you've sacrificed for, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between enabling someone's bad behavior and protecting your own well-being? How did you find the courage to put yourself first? Please hit that like button. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life experiences and share this with anyone who might need to hear that. It's okay to choose self-respect over people-pleasing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you can provide. May you find the strength to surround yourself with people who see your worth beyond what you can give them.